Lemon Amiga presents a Playguide video review. Sit back and enjoy the show.
Hi there, welcome to another Lemon Amiga game guide and review. In this week's episode, we're checking out Degeneration, developed by Abersoft and published by Mindscape in 1992. In Degeneration, we take control of a courier and it's our job to deliver a package to Jean-Paul Derrida. By pressing the U key, we can check out that package and we see that we are in Singapore at the moment, on top of the Genok Biotech building. All we have to do is to walk from here and to deliver our documents, so gaining access to the foyer, hopefully we can find the receptionist and drop off these documents and gain some easy money. Unfortunately, in the reception area we find an automatic gun turret which will blow us away if we don't deactivate that, and the receptionist is cowering behind the desk. Let's see what she has to offer. In this mystery-type thriller adventure game, we have to rescue a certain number of survivors which have been trapped and held hostage in this skyscraper, a little like the Die Hard film. And you may notice similarities also to the Impossible mission game as well. And in this game it features similar buttons and similar monsters that we have to get rid of, and also similar information booths where we can gather information. But this game, rather than jumping around, it's certainly a walk 'em up, and we have to press all those buttons in order and travel these levels in the correct order in order to gain these objects. The first one is a security key which we'll need to gain access to the rest of this level, and we also find another hostage. It's important to rescue all of the hostages in this game because they will award us an extra life. And as extra lives are sapped quickly in this game, you certainly will need to make use of that mechanic and to get as many lives on these easy early levels as possible. We can ask these questions and we can interview these guys, and we can certainly gain a lot of information at this stage Derrida is a mad scientist holed up in the penthouse, and all we have to do is to get there, and you may see something flashing in the corner. That's one of the most important objects, in fact the most important object, the laser. Yes, it's important to sweep and clear each one of these rooms by deactivating all those terminals and any enemies which shall get in our way, and this is really a run and gun shoot 'em up in some cases, but if we hold down the enter key next to one of these terminals we can also interact with that. Genok, we're into your genes, and as the mystery thriller uncovers we'll find out exactly what Genok is all about, and for the moment we'll just face a lot of these A generations, which are these bouncing balls you can see, and if we collide with those we'll certainly get killed, so let's use our laser and get rid of those. You can see a trap on the floor, that's actually the entrance gate, and it reminds me of Gauntlet. You have to close that trap and then those aliens won't spawn, and then we can make our way across to the next section, and making our way from room to room sometimes you have to be quick on the draw, otherwise you'll get sapped by one of those things. And you can see another sapper on the floor, that's an electric field, and if we walk into that of course we'll get fried, so let's not bother to do that, and let's avoid all these automatic guns in our way. Sometimes the buttons are different shapes. You can see triangular buttons and square buttons. It doesn't really make much difference, you can see those very clearly, but unfortunately if you get those buttons in the wrong order then you can have to tempt fate and try to get back, and in this case of course we needed to activate that doorway to escape the easy way, but it is possible to escape the hard way should you collect the wrong thing and get into trouble. So there you go, running around the enemy there, literally running around those things is the best way to go, and you'll certainly see more of that tactic later on. And at this stage the game is simply getting the player used to these early puzzles and the way to tackle each room. Sometimes you have to be gung-ho, and sometimes you have to figure out a specific order, and if you are having trouble we will eventually gain a hostage, and some of those hostages don't even give us any information. Let's just walk to the exit, and that hostage is pretty dumb. Sometimes you have to guide those hostages manually by the hand, but here we are at the exit pipe. You can see at the top of the screen marks the exit to this level, and all I have to do is to get there and then we'll move up, and there are only 10 levels in this game. This is the 10th, and we will move up to level 81, which is the 9th level after this. So all we need to do is to figure out the right combination, and sometimes, well, sometimes it's very difficult to get those prisoners home, because in this case we have to avoid this energy field, and if that guy makes contact with that, well, he dies. But that's one way to get rid of those energy fields, and we'll have to make use of that mechanic later on. We can save our progress to disk at any point by holding down Alt and S keys, and we can retrieve that save by holding down Control and R. And at the moment, this floor 81 definitely starts to introduce the player to more tricky aspects of this game, and sometimes doors and switches have to be handled with the laser. The mechanics of this 3D environment in this isometric 3D game makes sure that we have to bounce lasers off walls and things like that, and so the action in this game has puzzles under the surface, and those puzzles do get fiendish as we carry on from room to room. And of course we can save our progress again at any point and reload that at any point should we get stuck. But be careful, because there are certainly no way backs in this game, and if you use the wrong item at the wrong point then you'll have to go back in the game, and that means restarting it all over again. In this screen you can see we are faced by aliens. The A generation have managed to squeeze us down into a single atom, and they do that turning into a space hopper apparently. And this game was released in 1992, but it was started apparently as far back as 1985, maybe 1986, and so space hoppers were there at that period. And we've found another hostage, so hopefully if I rescue this hostage that will restore the life that we lost with that space hopper. And as I say, some of those are quite ignorant, just like lemmings. You'll have to lead those by the hand, get those to the exit. That's 4 people rescued, and I'm not quite sure the total number of people on all these levels, but there are certainly a few guys to pick up on every section of this game. So on the second level we find the next generation. This is the B generation, you can see bouncing around, and of course if they land on our heads we'll be flattened to the spot. Not very cartoon-like, but very effective all the same. Those really do accelerate across the screen, so you can't hang around. And look at that, another terminal. This is Jean-Paul Derrida, and he is a menace. We'll have to find him and locate the amazing D generation prototype, which is the last generation prototype which will attack us. And I think this particularly haunting photograph and all this information really sets up this game to be amazing and very deep and very atmospheric, just like all those 1950s and 60s thrillers that we got. And yes, the mechanics of this game really do remind me of Mission Impossible, a great late 1960s and early 70s TV show. And Impossible Mission is something that requires mind-bending techniques and players to get through different puzzles, and yet it is possible at the end of the day. So let's move around these pretty linear levels at this point, and it's great that the player really doesn't get lost on the way around, and it's thanks to this amazing difficulty curve that the player can get far in the first place, because the difficulty curve means that we can progress very quickly at this stage, and it lures us deeper into the mystery and the saga. Let's just avoid yet again those menacing, paralysing electro traps on the floor. Let's just accrue a few more lives, because when things get tricky, as they say, lives can disappear. And in this screen it introduces to the fact that we can destroy that barrier. If we lure a critter over there, one of these A-gens should get rid of that no problem, and that gives us yet another free survivor. And again, this scene reminds me of Nakatomi Plaza, the high-rise skyscraper in the Die Hard 1 film. And that is no bad thing, because we really did not get a great Die Hard conversion on the Amiga. Although a great Die Hard 1 appeared on the PlayStation 1. Certainly enjoyed that game. And so let's make our way around this level, and at this point you can see it is fairly easy for the player to understand that all they need to do is to pick up a few keys and use the objects in the room against itself. Hopefully these buttons should deactivate these Century drones, and then by using the mechanics of the room against itself we can attack these A-gens, and they're certainly easy to get rid of at this stage. Let's secure that trap and secure this room, and now we can move on to the next one. Every room is just like a combination lock, and as soon as we figure that out, that's a great feeling. And yet again, it includes a great difficulty curve so that we can get far, but all those survivors won't make a move towards that exit unless all those enemies have disappeared. Luckily, the enemy gets us out of that room, and we can use our faithful laser to blow those enemies out of the picture. And once those are now dispensed, we can now free this guy. And you can see the terminal. Any room which contains a terminal can also contain a puzzle as well. And now we find out a little more about Derrida, or as I always called him, Derrida. And we'll also gain our first weapon, which is actually a bomb. And we can use that bomb to blow up the pink door, which is on the top of that screen, which blocks our exit. But unfortunately we'll certainly need that bomb later on in the game, so if you use that before the end of the game, then you've wasted that opportunity. And, well, talking about dead ends, if we try to access this terminal, we'll have to enter a username, and of course we have no idea what that is at the moment, so we can't get through the door that way either. But there is a third way. If we move into this corner, that will access a trigger point, and we can remotely trigger that door from the secretary's desk. And now we can walk into that cell and interview the guy within. So this really does ramp up the tension at this point as we find out all these little survivors, their stories, and what is actually going on. And talking of Christmas, apparently if you play this game during the holidays, the entranceway, the actual foyer room, will gain some kind of decorations to attribute the holiday period. And I haven't got that to work, but if you change the Amiga real-time clock, maybe you can get that to work. And here we go. His name is Seth and the password is ostrich. And that is a quite difficult puzzle to figure out unless you figure out that there is a trip switch by the secretary's desk. And now that that 8th person has been rescued, we can now enter that information into that terminal. Seth and ostrich. That is how you open that door the easy way. That is certainly a block to many players, and let's not be tempted to use that bomb, because if we press the U key to access our inventory and check out that bomb, unfortunately if we select that it will be placed and go off. And as I say, if that does go off, then you've ruined your chances of completing the game. And later on we'll also find some hand grenades as well, and those can be triggered, and those can actually help us destroy those remote drones, those towers that appear. And let's just time our way through these easy rooms and make our way through towards a difficult area. You can see we have to collect the package and the key in this section, and it isn't possible, unfortunately, to stray too far off that path, because if we do so, we'll find that we have to use that key in a later room. And you can see the exit to this level is blocked by a white chevron, which means that we need a key to access that. So let's just secure this room and check that out. No, we'll need that key. And yet again, we'll have to tempt fate and run beyond this electro trap and try to run and sneak our way through this action. Apart from the terrific music that you heard at the beginning of the game, there is actually no music contained in the game itself. And you can see here a spot selection of sound effects, mostly the laser blasting away and the tip-tap of this guy's footsteps. And perhaps he's wearing brogues, because those things really do tap on this floor. And that's the key picked up. Can we collect the box? Well, we can use the teleports, but unfortunately the projectiles teleport with us, and that's a life over. And so lives in this game really haven't come into effect until this point, because we can usually clear a room in one sweep, and those are pretty usually obvious what the player must do. But in this case, with 2 sentry drones on offer, well, this room does pose a little bit more of a problem. So let's see if we can get through that by timing these things. Just like the Great Escape, we can make those maneuvers, and sometimes we can go for the hardest one first and then make our way towards the easiest one straight after that. But if we mess up that sequence and that timing, unfortunately we may struggle. Look at that, just about. And therefore we can now get to that exit. And there are only 10 levels, and I haven't quite completed this game. I know I've got quite far, maybe up to the 7th level, but I know that the levels do become very tricky after a while, and sometimes you will lose lives very quickly, and sometimes you have to move through those puzzles like you know what you're talking about. You can see we have collected 1 grenade in that special package, and apparently if we press the T key we can launch a grenade, and that will definitely destroy one of these sentry towers. And you have to use those sparingly, of course, because grenades have to be used at the last possible resource moment, otherwise you've wasted those, and those could have been used on the hard ones later on in the game. And we will collect more grenades later on, but for now let's just try and get through some more of these stages and show you more of this game. Unfortunately we won't get off the 3rd level in this playthrough. At this point I will also point out that the hidden traps in the game certainly aren't fair, and you have to know about those. You can see something flickering in the corner, that's actually another electro trap, and we'll find plenty of those later on. But for now we'll just have to notice those hidden elements and sweep and clear these rooms. Don't take anything for granted. This is a tricky game, and so you can't march through this at full speed, although some of these traps certainly require us to take a run and a dive for cover. I'm not sure if it's even possible to trap those guys in that box at the end, and well, we can try that, but we really don't need to make our way back this way at this stage. Some of the later stages will remind us that we have to backtrack, but these rooms really are linear at this point. But now we get onto yet another tough section, and this tough section is something which requires thought, because in this room we have 2 sentry guns and at least 5 of those buttons that we have to press to activate doors, and unfortunately it is very difficult to get past this section unless, of course, you use lateral thinking. And if I try to make a run for it past that gap, then of course that sentry will blow me away, and I will no longer have any access to that key. We still have 8 lives, so let's speed up that footage and let's try to get through this room. It's not easy, even when you think that you've covered the room inside out. And then there's always the escape plan, and sometimes the best laid plans don't go actually perfectly to plan after all. So it is possible to complete this room, and so let's just speed up this footage. You can see the graphics are made up of this astrometric 3D environment, and the graphics on offer have been polished up in this AGA version very slightly. The original OCS version required 1 megabyte of memory and is one of the few Amiga games which required that in order to play it, and the original graphics were ported across from the PC and the Atari ST, which were the original versions of this game, and the Amiga didn't really get a dedicated version until the AGA version came out a year later in 1993. There was also a CD32 release version released in 93, and you saw that on the introduction sequence, and that really doesn't change from the stock AGA version you can see at the moment. And so let's use our lateral thinking. Yes, we can use a grenade against this guy should we wish to do so, but it is actually possible to get through this without using any grenades. And yes, sometimes you can rebound shots off walls and hit trigger points and somehow disable that enemy. It's certainly pixel hunting on the floor to find the perfect spot and the perfect way to do that. And so the logical puzzles in this game added on top of this environment are great. They are certainly not hard enough to really offend the player, and they are certainly easy enough to figure out, but practice makes perfect in this game. And if unfortunately I use the bomb, then yet again that's wasted for later on, and that won't do us any favours either. We can't lob the bomb, but we can lob grenades with that T key. Unfortunately, I forgot the key to lob the grenades in this playthrough. Finally, after some trial and error, we make it out of that frying pan and we enter the next room, which is into the fire. Sometimes you can't always avoid all these things, and sometimes you'll have to find safe spots, otherwise that's a needless life over. And you can see tricky puzzles like this have to be worked out. Unfortunately, this room is simply there to collect grenades, which you'll need later on in the game anyway, so you cannot afford to skip any rooms, and you have to tackle all these things head on and brave it. And sometimes the best laid plans do actually return a fruitful outcome after all, and sometimes this really great atmosphere piles up and sets the heart racing. One false move could trigger that trap, and we are the bait, so let's not fall for that. Let's make a run for this safe spot in the corner, and let's close our eyes and hope that we make it. this third stage, we must collect the keys at the end of 4 spiral arms which spiral away from the start screen, which is also the end screen. We have to unlock the exit door using 4 different keys, and let's just speed up that footage so we get there, and you can see that the progress is made very much easier. Let's just see if we can find the lock for that key actually, and there we go, the security door is now open. That means we can get through these levels, and yet again, let's not fire at these things, let's just get rid of those obstacles for us. And now the player is becoming wise to these tips and tricks, and they are actually becoming wise to the theme of this game, and they can't rush through it, of course, otherwise they'll get killed, but that's where the great respect comes in, and working out these skilled tricks like this so that I can actually get into that doorway and kill the last guy, and then I can rescue that last prisoner. It means it's another lazy job, and it's another case of lateral thinking. Unfortunately, it is also possible to kill all those survivors, and the rescue operation will certainly not fail if you blow those away, but that will mean no longer access to a free extra life. To give you a little background on this game, it was coded by Robert Cook, Jim Brown and John Jones Steele.
Hello, I'm John Jones Steele. I'm COO here at West Coast Software. Back in the early 90s, I was working with Robert Cook and worked on the original version of Degeneration.
John Jones Steele originally coded both the Mirrorsoft and the Infogrames version of Tetris. The first one appeared in 1987 for the Amiga, and he went on after this to Alfred Chicken in 1993. The original Atari ST graphics were drawn by Vicky Sidley, Nancy Brooks and Steve Lenny. Steve Lenny also created the Mindscape game Nightmare based on the TV series, and he also drew graphics in Moonstone as well, which appeared in 1991. The great music that you heard over the introduction sequence was created by Sean Juggler, or Googler perhaps, and this was his only musical score on the Amiga. I think it's great that the action is broken up into different sections, the firing section, and of course the puzzle section that we've seen already, but there is also the deeper thriller mysterious section, which is these still screens which fill out this game, and as I say, the haunting picture of Jean-Paul Derrida was so great and so effective, and it's perhaps the one thing that people remember about this game, and that's not such a bad thing either. Robert Cook was based out in the Huntington Beach area of LA in California, and he was a bedroom coder. He started out with Gumball in 1983 on a Commodore 64. From there he moved on to Yale University out there in Connecticut on the other side of America, and he bumped into one of his best friends, Jordan Mechner, and he worked together with Jordan on the Karateka game, converting Karateka to the C64 in 1985. He was one of the models in Jordan Mechner's follow-up game, Prince of Persia. He was a model for most of the fighters, not actually the main character himself. Whilst at Yale, he also met the people who would inspire him and encourage him to make Degeneration.
part of it too was inspired because I was in university at the time. I had taken a few years off between my secondary school and university, and then so I was there. I was a bit older, but I was nevertheless living in the dormitories, and so some of the rooms were actually patterned after the rooms that were at my university, and some of the people were characters. Later in the game, not Derrida, but the president of the company was a very close friend of mine. And his pictures all over the walls as almost like a fascist dictator. And it turns out he was, when I first met him, he was from Yugoslavia. And by the time I met that, he was from Slovenia. The country had dissolved. So he thought it was funny that I was giving him a sort of dictator quality.
Robert Cook moved on to The Last Express in 1997, and he was last heard of helping out with modern remakes. There was Regeneration in 2004, which was a reimagination of the game by Dream Codex. And more recently, there is the Degeneration HD project, John Jones Steel from the original game, with West Coast Software. They agreed to update the game, and that is available to the Steam community as well as the iOS machines.
It's a great idea. I mean, I thought, we were obviously constrained back in 1991. I mean, we had 320 by 240 pixels, and even with that, it was taxing the system to draw the graphics. So when you guys approached me saying that you could do it with 3D hardware, it's like, that sounds great. We would have done it that way had we could have at the time.
I think the graphics in Degeneration aren't amazingly well drawn, but they are certainly better than the head over heels formula that we did have to endure in some games on the Amiga. It's certainly been fleshed out there, but there hasn't been massive improvements over the original OCS game, and the CD32 only has a few changes, including a new instruction and the new music. I think a subtle background theme wouldn't have done this game any harm. Maybe a presence of subtle chords, maybe like a film noir, and that certainly would have added something to this game. But apart from that, I think the drone that we have at the moment, which sounds like a ventilator, is certainly good enough, and that adds some kind of presence to the game. The sound effects are certainly amicable, and you will also find that this game came on 2 discs, so it was quite large, and it's certainly large enough to keep the player going. And was it value for money? Well, this was released at $25.99, so the player does get quite a few days of action for that money, and it's certainly not a waste of time. On the Amiga, you can see that white dot gives away the fact that there are sensors beyond what we normally have in this game, and there is a micro switch all the way over there. So if we can get there with the laser, we can trigger that micro switch, and that should mean that the ground turret isn't activated, and if we take a step forward it will be. So it's very difficult to see that thing, but if we blow a few of these away, then that's the room secured. And now that the room is secured, there is only 2 ways out. First, we'll have to find that micro switch to get out, and if we can't do that, we can always commit suicide and try again. I also like the fact that these rooms are subtly shaded different colours, blue ones and cream ones. We can see the exterior of the building as well, and that gives us a comic book feel to this game. And you can see that the rooms aren't amazingly 256 colours. There isn't amazing shading on the floor either, and even though this game is probably as good as the Amiga could do in isometric 3D, it isn't the full 3D that we got on games like Die Hard for the PS1. That's the last character saved on this level, and all we need to do now is to collect that final exit door key, and we can make our way towards the next section. And of course these sections will take longer and longer to play, and the first section is very quick to get through, and the last section will take ages. It's a good job that there are only 10 levels in this game, and it's a pity that there are only 10 levels in this game, depending on how you take a look at that, but it will take the player some time to get through the lot. I'd say at least an hour, even if the player knows what they are doing straight from the go. I really don't know what I'm doing in this game, but I'm making it up as I go along. It's been some time since I've played this, so let's move on to floor 83, the final section I will show you in this play guide. And I'll save my game, even though we've blown up the bomb, and that means that we cannot complete the game from here on in. But that's just one of the perils and pitfalls of the game, and getting rid of this electro trap isn't actually possible, so yet again we'll have to make a run for it and literally run rings around those enemies in order to get through these levels. And sometimes the objects cannot even be collected, so that thing is a disposable. It isn't actually a box of grenades, which I thought it was. And look at that, sometimes if we enter gung-ho, then those traps will start to kill us, and from here on in you really must have respect for this game, otherwise it will kick your ass, and there's no two ways about that. So this is yet another guy save, but oh no, not quite. And now the lives start ticking down. The pedestrians and the citizens that we need to rescue also begin to tick down as well, and it's certainly not easy to rescue people from here on in. This is a particularly devilish trap, and we'll have to go all the way around to the other side of the building, remembering of course to keep this door open, otherwise it's pointless to come even this far down here. It should be possible to get a laser blast all the way to the other switch, but I can't seem to figure it. So forgetting to leave that door open means that we'll have to go all the way back to this spot and do that. But for now we can continue on to the next room, and it's great that we can continue on to different rooms even if we get stuck. And I think the mix of mystery and high action certainly gives this game an amazing feel and an amazing atmosphere. Maybe not as strong as games like Hired Guns, but way up there. And this game did require that extra memory to get all this into the Amiga's memory space. But I remember having fond memories of this game, and I haven't played it in some time, so that's why I'm struggling to operate all these switches. Moving on to the scores, Amiga format in this case was the lowest score I could find. Amiga format issue 37 in August 1992 gave the OCS-ECS version 66%. They complained it was a very blocky and boring PC conversion and didn't really push the Amiga to any kind of limit. Amiga Dream was the second lowest with 77%. Acar gave it 77%. CO Amiga gave this game 80%. Tony Dillon said that this was one hell of a game, and he wouldn't say that unless it was one hell of a game. Amiga Action gave D-Generation 81%. Amiga Joker followed with 81%, as well as Amiga Computing. The current Lemon Amiga score is 83%. Amiga Mania gave this 86%. Amiga Power gave this 88%. Ace gave it 88%, the One gave it 89%, Zero gave it 91%, and the German Dato magazine gave this an incredible 93%. All of those give the original game an average score of 8 out of 10, which means it's still very good, if not very, very good. But it's not brilliant or outstanding. It's certainly something that is a great play once in a while if you're in the mood for these kinds of adventures. And before this, there really was only the point and click adventures where we could get into puzzlers, and before that there was the typing adventures that we found in computer magazines. So the adventure genre certainly has come on in leaps and bounds, but it's split at this point. From this point onwards, it went into the 3D realms of the action genre, and the puzzle element in most adventures these days is left on the back burner. On the Amiga, you can see that we've still forgotten to open the door from the other side of the room, and even though we are trying our best to hit the sweet spot, which we have, unfortunately we are still going to have to backtrack all the way to the other point where we got to before and activate that other switch. So let's just speed our way back up again and get killed in the process of trying to do that. In conclusion, I find this game is very absorbing. It certainly requires a good trigger finger and a good puzzle memory and a good memory for all these traps as well. And unfortunately it has one or two drawbacks. It isn't amazingly linear, and if you do make a mistake then there is no way back, particularly if you've saved over your previous save. But this game does encourage the player along at every step, and they certainly have not spent their money unwisely if they bought this game. And so I do have respect for this game. And here on the penultimate screen of level 3 we find another terminal, and in here we can discover some info on the B generation which have been attacking us so far. So this game really reticent to give us info until that really becomes appropriate, and we can discover that the B generation is pretty harmless as long as you blast away at that. It's certainly not as harmful as these automatic turrets. And so basic maneuvers have to be learned in this game, but it's still not a nightmare, and it's very easy to get from one screen to another. So let's move on to the final screen, and this screen marks the appearance of the C generation. The C generation can mimic anything from a lampshade to a table to a human being, and you never have any clue which items hold the C generation until you fall over those in the correct vicinity. They will attack and then decapitate us in one fell swoop, and no amount of laser blasts will get rid of that. No, the only way to get rid of that guy is to make him go into that electric pulse, and hopefully that will take him down, as well as the electrified fortified fence there. And it's unfortunate that every time you get killed, that electric fence will move slightly slower, making it slightly harder to line that up with the guy emerging from that room. If you time it wrong, of course, you'll be trapped between a rock and a hard place, and you'll have to try that all over again. So if at first you don't succeed, you'll have to keep going, and now that that laser blast is even slower, moving across that screen, idling away, it's almost possible to outrun that from the go. And now just a small matter of timing this. No, unfortunately it is not possible to hit him with the laser blasts, and that won't do anything either. You have to lure him out, and well, that C generation is transformed into a chair, and it transformed us into a pool of blood on the floor. Unfortunately, it is far easier to complete this room when you first emerge, and before that thing has started slowing down to a grind. Otherwise, just like this, the monster will trigger and it will casually walk straight by that barrier, and there will be no harm to it whatsoever, which leaves us no place to go. If we lose our final life, then we'll simply restart on whichever level that we died on, and in this case we're still on level 83, and we can also press the Control and R key to reload our save, and we can also save that game as well. And so I think this game does have redeeming features, and it's certainly a great game to come back to when you are feeling bored and you want to investigate another Nakatomi building. So thank you once again for viewing a play guide and review to this game. I hope you can get further than I did. It's certainly not tough, but it definitely commands respect. See you in the next play guide sometime soon. Thank you.